Thank you for staying with us on Lens on Africa. And a quick reminder that you can be a part of this program by engaging all our social media platforms now showing on your screen. We would love the feedback. Welcome to the interview segment on Lens on Africa, where voices rise and stories inspire. Maritime transport powers international commerce, carrying the majority of goods that fuel economies around the world. And Africa is blessed with long coastlines and key sea routes. Therefore, this sector holds immense promise, and it is believed that with stronger investment and innovation, Africa could position itself as a vital gateway for trade, opening doors to new markets, creating employment and fueling prosperity. In a moment, we will be unpacking the role of shipping in global economy with a focus on Africa. Stay with us.
The International Day for Maritime is known as World Maritime Day and is celebrated globally on the last Thursday of September each year to recognize the importance of international maritime industry. The theme for the 2025 World Maritime Day is Our Ocean, Our Obligation, Our Opportunity. This theme emphasizes the central role of the ocean in global trade and resources, highlighting the shared responsibility to protect marine environments and the opportunity to use innovation for sustainable ocean stewardship. Shipping serves as a critical lifeline for the global economy and for Africa. It is the indispensable backbone of trade, economic development, and integration into the world market. Despite its potential, Africa's shipping sector navigates a complex set of challenges: infrastructure gaps, bureaucratic inefficiencies, and security concerns like piracy, which disrupts supply chains and increase costs. On Lens on Africa interview segment today, we shall examine the role of shipping in the global economy with a focus on Africa. Stay tuned.
Thank you for staying with us on Lens on Africa and joining me in the studio to discuss the role of shipping in global economy with a focus on Africa is Captain Caleb Danladi Bako. He is a seasoned master mariner with over 15 years of professional experience in the shipping, oil and gas, and maritime logistics sectors. His skills span maritime operations, offshore management, port and terminal operations, international logistics, supply chain strategy, safety management systems, crew training and leadership development, project management and business development. He holds a PhD in international logistics, supply chain and shipping, bringing both academic depth and practical expertise to the global maritime industry. Captain Caleb Danladi Bako, it's good to have you join us on the program.
Good evening, viewers, and thank you very much for having me.
All right. And of course, today we're discussing the role of shipping, in global economy with a focus on Africa. And, given that over 80% of Africa's trade, by volume moves by sea, how would you quantify the direct impact of shipping on the continent's GDP? And what is the broader role in achieving key development goals like the Africa Free Continental Trade Area?
Okay, thank you very much for this important question. As you have mentioned earlier, that maritime trade is the lifeline of global economy. More than 90% of global trade is being carried via the maritime transportation. So without maritime transportation, the global trade will definitely not be there. So that's very, very important. And the maritime trade has contributed to GDPs of different countries and the global GDP. So back to your question now regarding the direct impact. So the maritime trade has a very, very significant impact when it comes to GDP. First of all, we have the direct impact, we have the indirect impact, and we also have the induced impact. Let's look at the direct impact. So maritime trade now, during when you are shipping cargo or when you are bringing in cargo from different countries to Nigeria, what do? You pay custom duties. It generates revenue to the government. That's a very, very crucial part. The second aspect is on job creation. The people that work in ports, the people that work in ships, it creates jobs for them and they contribute to the GDP of the country. The other aspect is also about the finance aspect. You register ships in Nigeria, it contributes also to the GDP. The concessioning of ports to private terminal operators generate money to the country. So it's very, very important. Those are the direct impacts. So let's look at the indirect impact. Without shipping today, the manufacturing sector will be crumbled. Without shipping today, we cannot be able to move crude oil from one point to the other, from one destination to the other. Without shipping today, we cannot be able to transport the LNG, the energy that we use for consumption. So those are the indirect impact. So let's look at the induced impact on GDP. Now, when a ship comes to port and the ship offloads, there is jobs for people in port, but also there's an induced impact for a truck driver that's going to move containers from Apapa port now to Kaduna or to Lagos. There's also an induced impact for somebody who is in Kaduna who is working in a warehouse. So you can see there's an induced impact and they also contribute to the GDP of the country. So it's very, very important. Another aspect is shipping brings about industrialization. Because if you have a port here, there is tendency that you have a lot of manufacturing industry very, very close to the port. And the idea is for them to be able to import their raw materials and to be able to export their finished goods. So it's very important. And when you have industry, what it's going to do is going to stimulate the real estate business. And then from that part, you are also contributing to the GDP of the country. So it's very, very crucial. So you have the direct impact, the indirect impact, and also the induced impact. So let's look at the Africa continental trade. So it's very, very important. I think one of the greatest blessings that we have in Africa is the African free continental trade areas. You know, where we are going to have a single market in Africa. And according to UNDP, what did they say? It says that the African free continental trade market, when completed, is going to increase the African trade by 33%, and is also going to reduce the African trade deficit by 55%. So it's very, very important. And when it's increasing the trade by 55%, what will happen? We are going to move all this trade by sea. So the shipping is a lifeline of all the trade. So for us to be able to move cargo from, let's say, Abidjan to Lagos is through ships. So it's very, very important and very, very crucial. So shipping is going to play a crucial role when it comes to the Africa continental free trade areas. It's going to play a significant role, because as the trade is growing, the demand for shipping is also growing. So you need ships to move these materials, so raw materials and finished products, from one destination to the other within the African space. Another important aspect that we have to look about is, you know, when there's growth in shipping services, it's going to bring about modernization, it's going to bring about development. So the ports themselves will be modernized, they will be developed to be able to meet with the volume of cargoes that are there. So it's going to bring modernization in our port system. And through that, we are going to also utilize alternative ways of transporting goods. For instance, we are going to utilize the river means of transportation. Now you can move goods from one destination to the other. When it gets to the port, you can now utilize barges to transport them through the rivers to different destinations. Very, very important. So when it comes to African continental and free trade area, the shipping is going to play a significant role and a very, very key role in that aspect.
All right. Now, with all these, benefits you've mentioned, a lot of African ports, still struggle with congestion, draft limitations, outdated equipment. My question here is, what are the most critical infrastructure investments needed to transform, these ports into the efficient gateway for trade?
Okay, there's a very, very important question that you have asked. We have discussed about the impact of shipping in global trade. Yes, shipping plays a significant role. So as the volume of trades in Africa is rising, the demand for ships and port infrastructure will also rise. But today in Africa, we have issues in different ports. Some of the issues are we have outdated equipment, which affect the productivity of ports. We also have the shallow drafts, which limit bigger vessels to come into port. We also have the issue of lack of digitalization in some ports, which makes a lot of these ports to rely on manual means of documentation, which in that aspect there's issue of transparency. You can easily make errors. So it's very important for us to leverage on this opportunity. First and foremost, we must be able to invest strategically and aggressively when it comes to port infrastructure.
In what way?
Modernization of port infrastructure is very, very crucial. We need to invest in the state-of-art equipment. With that, it's going to improve the productivity of ports. The container that it takes 10 to 20 minutes to offload might be offloaded in less than 5 minutes. So it's very, very important. So it's going to improve the productivity of ports. The other aspect is about dredging of our channel, expanding our channel. That will enable larger vessels to come in. And when you have larger vessels, you look at economic of cost. You are bringing in more goods, so it's cost effective for you to bring in a big ship than for you to use multiple smaller ships. So we need to dredge our channels so that they can accommodate the bigger ships. It's very, very important. Another aspect is about digitalization. We need to invest in digitalization. The world is moving at a fast pace, so we need to adopt the digital system. For instance, the maritime single window system, which I'm very happy Nigerian government has adopted it, and very, very soon is going to come on stream, and that will reduce the issues of multiplicity of government agencies that we are having today, because it's going to be on one single platform where you submit all your documents. It's going to reduce the administrative burden on a lot of shippers and cargo owners. So it's very, very simple. It's going to streamline a lot of documentation processes. It's very, very, very important. Another aspect that we need to focus more when it comes to ports, we need to also invest on warehouses, because as the goods are coming, we need to have storage area where we store them. Otherwise, the goods will pile up in ports and other ships cannot be able to come in. The dwell time would increase. And very, very crucial, we need to invest in human capital development, because it's the people that drive most of these activities in ports. We need to invest on seafarers. We need to train competent seafarers that are going to handle most of this equipment, most of these ships in port. Then when it comes to port, we need to train most of the port operators on the state-of-art equipment, because don't forget, we have mentioned we need to invest in the state-of-art equipment. It's another thing you invest in. It's another thing for you to have the technical expertise to be able to operate those equipment. So you need to train them. It's very, very important. And also, another thing that there's one thing about training, the other thing is about retaining them. So the condition of service must be very, very good and robust for them to be able to stay. Another challenge is most of the African countries have the cabotage law. What does the cabotage law say? Is to promote indigenous participation in shipping. So for the African continental trade area to excel, one thing we need to do is to be able to look at the current cabotage law that we have. Do we have the sufficient number of ships that are going to move this large volume of cargo that we are anticipating? Do we have the sufficient number of seafarers? Do we have the sufficient number of shipyards that are going to build? Then if we don't have this sufficient number, we have to start to look outside, to look how to source some of the ships that are going to move these cargoes from one destination to the other. It's very, very important. And I'm very happy the Nigerian government has shown political will. The cabotage vessel financial fund will soon be disbursed, where a lot of ship owners now will be able to purchase ships. So it's very, very important. And when it comes to relaxation of cabotage, we also have to be very, very careful when it comes to relaxing them. If you bring in foreign vessels, you have a lot of domination of foreign vessels in your water. What does that mean? It means that the indigenous people are going to lose that opportunity for business. A lot of jobs will be cut. So we have to plan it strategically. So it has to be in phases, you know, from one phase to the other, from the other one phase to the other. That will be able to enable us to achieve our goals.
All right, thank you. Now, recent events like, you know, the Red Sea crisis have forced, you know, ships to reroute around the Cape of Good Hope. Now, how has this disruption highlighted both the vulnerabilities and potential strategic importance of Africa's maritime geography in, you know, the global supply chain?
Okay, that's globally now, the global trading pattern has changed due to some significant events that have happened. So before I go into the Red Sea, there's also a significant event in the Panama Canal where we have the reduced water level, and it has forced a lot of ships to divert from the regular Panama Canal route down to southern part of America and to southern part of Africa. So when we also look at the Red Sea, you know, the geopolitical instability in the Red Sea region has caused a lot of ships to divert their voyage around the Cape of Good Hope to Asia-European route. What does that mean now? The idea of going through the Suez Canal is shortening the journey. A journey that is supposed to be, a voyage that is supposed to be for 10 days will now be for 20 days. So it's going to increase the voyage. It's going to increase the fuel consumption. It's going to increase the operational cost. What does that mean? It's going to translate this cost to the final user. There's going to be slight increase in freight rate. There's going to be a slight increase in those goods that are being moved via the southern part of Africa. But very, very important, we also have to look at there are also opportunities that exist in terms of this geopolitical instability. The African countries will leverage on this geographical instability to be able to develop most of our ports to be major hub ports. For instance, now Cape Town, Durban, Walvis Bay, Lekki Deep Sea Port will be utilized as hub ports now in Africa because of the diversion. And I mentioned earlier that the voyage from Europe to Asia or from Asia to Europe is going to increase because of the distance by 10 days. What does it mean? You need to consume more fuel. You need to consume more stores. So it's very, very important that those ports that are located along the Gulf of Guinea, along the Cape of Good Hope, they will be able, the ships will be able to stop in those ports for stores. What does that mean? More income for the country. It's going to create job opportunities for those people who are in the ship brokerage section, who are involved in bunkering and storing operations. So there's going to be opportunity. But another issue, because a lot of ships now are rerouting through the Cape of Good Hope, there's an issue of pollution because the carbon index is going to increase. So most ports should be able to build bunkering facilities that should be able to adopt the latest carbon emission, because a lot of these ships now consume LNG. So we should be able to have the LNG's terminal depots along the way where these ships will stop and bunker. So it's very, very important. It's an opportunity also for us to explore. So the geographical instability has created an opportunity again for us in Africa. So very, very important in terms of that. We need to have a form of regional cooperation in Africa because of this new trading route. So we need to invest strategically and aggressively to be able to meet with the trend, because as the world is changing, a lot of things are also changing. So now the global shipping pattern has changed. What does that mean? We need to invest to be able to accommodate most of those ships that will be involved in crew change, that will be bunkering, that will be taking its stores. So it's very, very important.
All right. Now, many countries protect their domestic shipping routes for their national carriers. Now, is there a case for relaxing certain cabotage regulations? You mentioned cabotage laws earlier, to foster greater competition and lower costs for moving goods between African nations. What would be the risks?
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the cabotage regime. The cabotage regime means all the vessels that are trading within the country must be built in that country, must be crewed in that country, must be owned in that country, and they must be able to carry out the participation. And the aim is to be able to develop a local content. One is going to provide job opportunities for the indigenes of that country, the citizens of that country. Is very, very important. But when it comes to cabotage law, a country that does not have sufficient fleet or that has old fleets and cannot be able to meet up with the volume of seaborne trade, then there is a danger there. The danger is you have a large volume of seaborne trade that needs to be moved and you have fewer ships. What will you have? You have a lot of congestion. So what we need to do is to be able to relax some of those cabotage law, to be able to bring in some foreign vessels that will support. But in spite of that, the government also should be able to provide some sort of incentives. They should be able to provide law. I'm really grateful to the Nigerian government. They have done a lot when it comes to that. Now, the Vessel Cabotage Financial Fund that has been withheld for over 20 years will soon be released. What does that mean? We'll have ship owners and that will use this money to buy new ships. So you have addition of new fleets into the country to be able to handle those volume of cargo. But another thing you mentioned, that was the risk. The risk is if you open your indigenous shipping to foreign ships, what will happen? You have foreign domination of your ships and the locals will not have their job opportunities. But another thing, we need to invest. Without investment, without the right policies in place, we will not be able to get there. We'll still rely on all these foreign ships. Yes. Right. And you need to provide finance. It's very important. Ships are expensive. So we need finance to be able to ensure that our fleet, we have adequate fleet. The old fleets need to be phased out because there are a lot of regulations, the carbon emission that have come into play. We have to design the ships to be in compliance with the green port infrastructure. Right. So it's very, very important.
Okay. Now, you had rightly mentioned that the maritime sector requires highly skilled professionals. Yes. That is the field you're playing in. So what is being done to develop a new generation of African maritime experts, from sailors to port engineers to logistic managers, even maritime lawyers, to ensure that the continent can captain its own shipping future?
Human capital development is very, very important and it's very, very crucial if we want to move the shipping industry forward. Now, I will give you some instances and some political will. For instance, the Nigerian government, they have invested a significant amount of resources when it comes to seafarers training. We have the Nigerian Seafarers Development Program where they sent some young cadets abroad to go and train so that they will be employed. So that is one aspect. They have done a lot in that aspect. However, we also have maritime training institutions in Nigeria like Maritime Academy of Nigeria, Oron, Federal School of Fishing and Oceanography in Lagos. We have the new maritime universities. But we have some challenges. The challenges is when you finish the theoretical part of your training, you also need what we call sea time to be able to qualify as a deck officer or as an engineering officer. And most times, most of these cadets that graduate, there is no seabed for them, even though, like I said earlier, the government has done a lot. So now the private sectors, the shipping companies should be able to come in to support when it comes to training of cadets, providing sufficient bed space for cadets. If we don't train them today and provide sufficient bed space for them to be able to be competent officers tomorrow, we have we have a risk that we'll have a shortage of seafarers in the future. So it's very, very important for us to leverage on those opportunities to train our seafarers. Another aspect is not only the seafarers that moved the global shipping. The seafarers, they move ships from one destination to the other, but when it gets to port, we also need to train the port operators. We also need to train the agents. We also need to train everyone that works in port so that they should be able to know what to do. So it's very, very important. Investment in human capital development is important. Another thing is not about training alone. You should be able to provide a convenient environment for them to practice. Another aspect is the issue of condition of service. So we are having a lot of brain drains today, people moving from one country to the other seeking for greener pasture. So we should be able to provide them a good condition of service, to have a good retainership strategy in place, so that when we train them, we are not just training them for another person, we are training them to utilize them, to retain them.
Very important, very important. Now, you know, while the issue of, let's talk about the issue of pirates now. Okay. While that has decreased in some regions like, you know, the Gulf of Guinea, it still remains a threat, if you'll agree with me. Now, how crucial is sustained, you know, maritime security cooperation among African nations for ensuring safe passage and attracting major shipping lines to African routes?
Okay, first of all, I have to commend the Nigerian government and the West African countries that have come together through this original cooperation to be able to suppress the issue of piracy that has always been a threat. Today, the number of pirate attacks has reduced drastically in Nigeria. The report from the International Maritime Bureau have stated it. So, for us to sustain it, we must continue to invest. We must continue to support. There must be regional cooperation to sustain this momentum. We must continue to deploy naval patrol vessels. There should be regional cooperation among the whole West African countries. We must be able to do that. It's very, very crucial. Sustainability is the key. The right policies have to be in the right place. We should be able to invest in infrastructure like drones that will carry out surveillance. We should be able to invest more in naval vessels. We should be able to get more patrol vessels so that we'll be able to sustain the momentum. The government have done their part. When you look at the Deep Blue project that was adopted by the federal government, you can see the impact. Now we have a reduction in the piracy rate. So, but sustainability is the key. And when it comes to sustainability, investment, the right policy and the political will must be there.
All right. And now, as we wrap up, you know, as we wrap up this segment, I'd like to ask you, looking ahead, say maybe a decade ahead, what would a truly successful, integrated and modern African maritime sector look like? And I mean, do you have the confidence that this vision is achievable?
Yes, I have your confidence, because if you look at, this is the first of its kind where the entire African continent comes together to have a single market. We have always hear about the EU markets, you know, so this is the first time. I'm confident that with the right policies in place, with adequate infrastructure, with the right investment, we'll be able to achieve our goal. And what I see Africa being the giant of shipping globally. I see Africa being the engine of the global economy, because if we are able to leverage on this Africa Free Continental Trade Area, I strongly believe that Africans will be leading when it comes to maritime nation. Let me give you an example today. One of the most efficient ports in the world, and is rated among the top 100 ports, is the port of Tangier in Morocco. It's Africa. If you look at Durban, we are doing good. So I strongly believe that with the right policies, with the right investment, I believe that Africa will be a maritime nation. It will be a home for a lot of maritime activities that will take place. And I believe the African Continental Free Trade, the vision that we have, we are going to achieve that vision. Because without shipping, you can produce whatever, but you can't be able to move it. So I believe we need to invest strategically we need to invest aggressively, and we also need to adopt digitalization when it comes to shipping. Very, very important. The world is moving towards decarbonization. We also have to look into sustainability aspect of decarbonization.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the program and sharing your insights with us on, the role of shipping in global economy, especially with a focus on Africa. I've been speaking with Captain Caleb Danladi Bako, a seasoned master mariner with over 15 years of professional experience in the maritime sector. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. From fueling global commerce to connecting Africa with international markets, shipping is more than just the vessels on water or moving cargo. It is a driver of growth, jobs, and opportunity. How Africa sails this course will shape the continent's economic future.